Okay, let's take a look at the box office from this past weekend. Total domestic box office was almost 72 million, which was just a slight little jump, about 4% from last weekend, which, was itself only like a 5% drop from the weekend before that. So the box office is more or less kind of held steady for like the past couple of weekends, which makes sense because we're in a weird place right now of, award season and some major studios trying to squeak in some last minute blockbusters, if you could call them that. Opening at number 1 for the weekend was Red One. This is the the action comedy with J.K. Simmons as Santa who gets kidnapped. So Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as like the head elf has to, with the help of human Chris Evans, he's just like a human, I think. They have to work together to save Santa. This is like a weird situation, right? So it opened above my projection. So I had projected to make around 24 to 30 million. Made about 34, which I was surprised to see. Did have a pretty wide release at over 4,000 theaters. And made like most of its money this first weekend overseas, which I was also not expecting. And worldwide it has about $84 million, right? So all of that's tracking to look really good until you consider the budget, right? So the budget is, I think I read it was anywhere from like $200 to $250 million. Now, where that money was going, I'm not sure. I mean, I've only have seen the trailers, and the trailers, the VFX look fine. They don't look bad by any means, but I would imagine most of that money is going to, or rather not even most of it, but just an exorbitant amount is going to salaries, right? Because you have J.K. Simmons, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Chris Evans, even someone like Lucy Liu is in the movie. I mean, she's not a huge star. I don't know if she's really able to command a super high salary, but she still is a name, right? She's still like someone that people know. So looking at the percent return, I mean, this could change week over week, but the reviews have not been particularly good. This is just, I don't know who this was for. I've said this before, that it's too, and I've heard this from people who have seen it, that it's, a little maybe too intense. Intense is the wrong word, but maybe a little too much for young children, who ideally would be your target audience for like a Christmas film. Just in terms of the action and like maybe some things going over their heads and maybe some curse words that you maybe wouldn't want a young child to hear, right? But on the flip side, it's also, the premise is not really something that you would target mainly to adults, right? It wants to be like this action comedy, but it seems like the action isn't very good, the comedy wasn't very good, and the Christmas element was a little out of place. So I don't really know who this movie was for. But again, it made $84 million worldwide, which is, again, way more than I was thinking it was going to make. So maybe this could hold out. But I think in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have much bigger films. I don't see this sticking around for super long, but I've been wrong before. Also, a couple kind of new things in the box office. We have a Filipino movie. Usually whenever we have like these foreign films, they're always like from India. This movie at number 8, Hello, Love Again, bringing in a little over $2 million for the weekend. Had the best per theater average of the top 10 at almost $9,400 per theater. Worldwide, it's made, because I think it's already been playing. I think it opened last week in the Philippines. And it's made a little under 9 million worldwide. So this is just like a small little bit of it, but apparently it was like, had this really big release for a Filipino film within the country, and then like a distributor picked it up for like an unprecedented worldwide release. So that, again, we're in a weird place where films like this are squeaking their way into the top 10. Also, another movie into the top 10 here at number 9, the indie movie by Jesse Eisenberg, who's also in the film A Real Pain, starring not Macaulay Culkin, but the brother, right? Kieran, right? The guy from Succession. They play like cousins, I think, who are going on like this tour of Europe, and they're Jewish. I think it has something to do with kind of like a Jewish, like kind of Holocaust tour memorial thing, and it's this, kind of this dramedy of them kind of coming together. So this has already been out. This is its third weekend, but it went wide this weekend. adding, I guess I don't have the amount of theaters that they added, because clearly this was not, what they started with. Let me just confirm here. Yeah, so they added almost 1,200. Right, so what is it? 1,185. They added 1,173. So it was only in like 12 theaters before. As you can see, that percent jump, like almost 700% jump, went from 18th to 9th place. I've heard really good things about this. I was gonna go see it last week, but I just ended up being busy. I'm hoping to try to reschedule it, but I'm going to be traveling, and there's going to be so many other things coming out. But again, I've heard really great things about this. So maybe I'll get some Oscar buzz, and then I'll have to watch it if it gets nominated for something, right? Still in the top 10, being dethroned by Red One, strangely enough. The third Venom film, Venom: The Last Dance, dropping from first to second now in its fourth weekend, bringing just a little over $7 million. But again, not a great drop, though. Like, over 50%. Lost almost 500 theaters. But the legs have been decent, right? So, that domestic multiple, right? This has been slowly but surely making money. Something I was, not anticipating. Just because I feel like I kind of soured on this brand. And Sony, especially a lot of other Sony, like, we've had a lot of other Sony films come out since the last Venom film. A lot of Sony Spider-Man villain movies that did not only not do well, but are considered some of the worst movies like ever made. So the fact this is doing as well as it is was a surprise to me. It's made almost $450 million worldwide off of a $120 million budget. So again, I would not call this a huge success, but this is a decent success, and it helps that there's no real competition for a movie like this, like an R-rated comic book kind of comedy. I guess like Deadpool and Wolverine kind of filled that niche, but this is basically the only thing like this, I think, for like the rest of the year. I don't know if there are any major comic book movies coming out for the rest of the year, but even if there were some, they would not be like in the same kind of category. Again, like an R-rated, irreverent film like this. But more power to Sony. But I think the next one they're releasing is Kraven the Hunter, which has been its release date has moved like a gajillion times, but I believe it's supposed to be releasing in December. That one seems like it could be good. Just because I like Aaron Taylor Johnson. But, this is definitely one of the more successful ones that they've done since the last Venom. But again, this is still pales in comparison to the other two Venom films. Also still in the top 5, we have holding its third place spot in its second weekend, the best Christmas pageant ever. The film based off of, I guess, like a Christmas children's book from decades ago, brought in about $5.4 million. This is not a good drop, almost 50%, but at least it was under 50%. Just barely, 49.9. It's like when you have like the hand sanitizer, it's like kills 99.999 repeating. So not great, but also, a film like this is not going to really put a lot of butts in the seat, right? So it's fine. Domestically, it's made almost $20 million, and that's the same amount worldwide. But it was only made for like $10 million. Again, it was a cheaper film. So it's just almost there at doubling the budget. It's so close, and ideally you want to double that budget to break even, because budgets don't account for marketing and advertising costs, right? I did not think this was going to be a good movie, but the trailer was actually better than I thought it would be. And reviews have been, they've not been bad or even mad. Like, they've just been like, yeah, it's fine. You'll have a good time, and your family it'll be like a good family movie to go see. And we don't really have a lot of movies like this. Like, this feels like a movie that would just go straight to Netflix. So it's interesting to see a movie like this, like, actually be in theaters again. I don't know. Maybe that's just nostalgic on my part. Also continuing into its second weekend, we have the A24 horror film Heretic, with Hugh Grant as the villainous, antagonist, about two I think young Mormon kind of missionary girls. That sounds weird. How can I rephrase that? Two young female missionaries of the Mormon church going door to door, and they get invited in, and it kind of becomes almost this like Saw moral dilemma kind of game thing. And it seems to be that was another movie I was gonna see last week, but I got busy. I do apologize, but I've heard it's decent. It only brought in about $5 million for the weekend, and it did have a little bit bigger of a drop than the Best Christmas Pageant Ever, over 50%, despite adding 9 theaters to what it was in, what it had last time. So, it's brought, this domestic total now is around 21 million for the, what did I say, domestically, a little over 25 worldwide, but it's just off of a $10 million budget. Again, this is the idea. It's better, at least in the long run, to make more cheaper movies to kind of spread out the risk. Because if you put all your money into one really big movie and it doesn't perform the way you want it, you might, need to be looking for another job. Whereas something like this is obviously not, a huge success story. But that's a good ROI. So if you can just make a bunch of $10 million movies that can bring in the same results, that's way more manageable, way more viable, and way more sustainable, right? Also, still in the top 5. This makes me so happy this is still here. And every weekend that it's in here makes me happy. We have The Wild Robot dropping from 4th to 5th place, but now in its 8th frame. This thing's been out for 2 months now. Bringing about 4.3 million. Lost a couple, about 150 theaters. This is a movie that, did not open super big, but the mission from the start was to have a slow and steady approach. And it helped the release date of, so if it was 2 months ago, so it would be like mid-September that this released, right? Mid to late September. It hasn't really had much competition when it comes to like a fun animated film for families that aren't super dumbed down, right? So something like Migration or Despicable Me 4, while those did very well box office wise, they're geared maybe at a younger audience, whereas this is still for children, but it has something that adults can enjoy. This is like one of my favorite movies of the year. And if you look at that domestic multiple, again, it opened around 36 million domestically, and it's made almost 140 million domestically. So it has legs, as I like to say. And worldwide, it's also pretty good, right? It's made over 300 million worldwide off of like a $78 million budget. So it's like almost a 300% return. So, obviously more expensive than Heretic. But again, like these small, like we're at the point where $78 million is like a smaller movie. Or at least like mid-level. So it's, but the issue is that Hollywood executives get really greedy. Or maybe the better word is they get, it's like blood in the water and they're sharks. Like they want the Avengers Endgame. They want the Star Wars Force Awakens. They want these movies that cost like $400 million to make, but make $1 billion, $2 billion, almost $3 billion. But again, I just feel like that's not sustainable. And we are in a shift post-strikes, post-pandemic, where the box office is, it's like that meme of like the football players, like they had us in the first half, not gonna lie, right? The first half of this year, in terms of the box office, was abysmal, save for a few examples here and there. But even then, those were underperforming in terms of historical context of what that film would have done 5 or 10 years ago. And then Inside Out 2, of course, blew the doors open. So I think the domestic box office is kind of finding its footing and what's going to work best for it. A couple other notes here. We have Smile 2 still in theaters and still in the top 10, dropping from 5th to 6th place in its 5th weekend. Made just a little under $3 million. Did have the worst per theater average of the top 10, but again, this is a movie that has been very, again, cheaper, but has had a very good ROI. It's brought in about 66 million domestically, 132 million worldwide, off of just a $28 million budget. And I'm surprised this is still in the top 10, because we're way past October at this point. We're way past kind of the spookier horror like the period where horror films are going to do the best, like that September and up to mid or late October. So kudos to Smile 2 for still hanging in there. It's had very good legs. Almost a 400% return on investment. So, hats off to them. But what's also interesting here is Conclave. So this is the, awards buzzy, religious political thriller about the election of a new pope. This is one of my favorite movies of the year so far. I wrote a review that I thought was a pretty good review. I put a lot of work into it, at least. You should go check out on cinemaincusa.substack.com, where I put reviews for new movies coming out. But this has done pretty well financially, all things considered. So it did drop from 6th to 7th, but in its 4th weekend, made just a little under $3 million for the weekend. Added 94 theaters, though. It's not super wide. It's only 2,400 theaters. But look at that domestic multiple. So it opened around 6.6 million, and domestically it's made almost 27 million. So this is like the first time I think that I've been doing these domestic multiple chart columns that we've had something enter the 4 range, right? It's the total domestic is 4 times as much as the opening was. And worldwide it's a little bit better, right? It most of this has been in the United States, which is interesting, since the director is Edward Berger, who I'm 99.9% positive he is German. German director, it says Wikipedia. So it's surprising this has not had a wider release internationally yet. But maybe they're waiting later in the year or early next year. But it was only made for about $20 million. So while it has not doubled the budget, it's at least crossed that initial threshold. Again, films like this are not about making a shit ton of money, but that always helps, especially if you're trying to build awards momentum. More people seeing it means more potential people vying or lobbying for it to be nominated for different awards. And then speaking of awards films, Anora is still here in the top 10. It did drop from 7th to 10th in its 5th weekend, so probably isn't going to stay here, especially with the weekend that's coming up, which we'll talk about in a second. Made just a little under $2 million, had only a 27% drop. Again, added almost 400 theaters. Still less theaters than Conclave, but still, it is an aggressive approach by Neon, the distributor, to make this a little more financially viable. This idea that indie films that cater to more sophisticated audiences, if you will, can still make money. They're not going to make a gajillion, billion, quadrillion dollars, but they're going to have a good ROI, and they're going to make the world a better place, right? Because good art, that's what good art does. It's made almost $20 million worldwide off of just a $6 million budget. This is easily one of the best films of the year, and it's really great to see that it is being rewarded for it at the box office. But I don't know if this is gonna win like Best Picture or be nominated for anything, because it is a little more like it's almost too good to be nominated for an Oscar. But I think those nominations don't come out till January, so we still have a long ways away before we should even be thinking about that. Okay, and looking to the weekend ahead, huge, of course, we have Wicked. This is a public service announcement. Despite the movie being over 2.5 hours long, it's a part 1. I don't know how they are taking a musical that, without the intermission, is probably also maybe 2.5, maybe 3 hours long, and are doing basically just Act 1, but that is just as long as the full thing. I don't know what they're adding to it. But from my understanding, this is a part 1, but they don't want to put that in the title because they feel like maybe that would be bad marketing for the film. But this is anticipated to have a very large opening, one of the biggest openings of the year, at anywhere from 112 to 140 million, which makes a lot of sense. Wicked is one of the, if not one of the best musicals in Broadway history, it's one of the most important, to be sure, and one of the most popular. So people have been dying for a movie adaptation for years. I remember when they finally were making this, because this has been like in development hell for ages. And I remember kind of thinking, is this a little too little too late? But some of the clips I've been seeing, I've been actually really good. Like I'm if you know me at all, like I'm really into movie musicals. I made one for my thesis film at NYU. So I have very strong opinions, right? So a good one is going to hit really hard for me, but a bad one's going to really piss me off. Some of the clips I've been seeing in terms of the camera work and the kind of the way they conceive some of these scenes that were on stage and now putting them into a film, seem kind of novel and interesting. So I'm excited to see it. I'm going to see it next week. So it's coming out this Friday. But I'm excited to see it. I just hope it's good because that's a long movie for basically only the first half of the story. Also opening, not as big, but still commendable. Gladiator 2, right? So Ridley Scott's follow-up. Talk about a movie too, like kind of happening way later than we thought it would. This is a sequel, of course, to the 2000 film Gladiator, or is it 2001? It's in that period. Russell Crowe, of course, is not in this because, spoiler alert, his character died at the end of the first one. But we have Pedro Pascal and Paul Mescal. I wonder if he cast them based off of like the fact their names kind of rhyme or sound the same. Two actors I love. Denzel Washington's also in it. Joseph Quinn's also in it. It's projected to make about 59 to 73 million. I've heard the reviews have been good. They have not been like, this isn't like the most amazing movie ever, but I think this might hit all the boxes for me. I thought the original film was kind of okay. But I just love these two actors. And the trailers have seemed really, really exciting. So, you know, again, not as big as Wicked, but we're having these larger movies coming out. And this is not a new trend, but this is just solidifying the trend of late November, starting with like Thanksgiving into like basically up until Christmas, being kind of almost like a secondary blockbuster season as a companion to the summer box office season. And then we also have a very small movie coming out, Bonhoeffer, projected to make about 3 to 6 million. This is like a biopic historical drama about the titular Bonhoeffer, who is the guy in this picture with the blonde hair, who is looking really intense at the other person. I guess it's about like this German theologian. This is essentially like a Christian film. But at least the Christian films today are better than when I was growing up, where they were like so A, bad, but B, like so pandery. This is based off of like a real German theologian who basically helped the Allies fight the Nazis in World War II. Seems like an interesting premise, but I can't imagine the film itself is going to be particularly revelatory. But again, it is projected to have a smaller opening, but again, with so many other big movies coming out, I think that's about the fact it's going to even open. If it can make it to the top 10, I think that will be a success for it. Wow, what an interesting story. I'm sure you have some thoughts about the topic, so comment below, let me know what you think. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really, really helps people find the channel and makes me feel all warm inside. Until next time, I'm Peter Mancuso. Peace out.